Warning: some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Seaman of Reddit, what is the scariest thing that happened to you while you were at sea? For fire protection on ships with large engine rooms, we can dump a shitload of CO2 into the space to smother the fire. It's a big deal if you have to use it because it will kill anyone in the engine room if they don't get out within 30 seconds of hearing the alarm. I was working 3 stories down from the entrance when I hear the siren go off and just about shit myself right there. I ran as fast as I possibly could to the escape hatch and bolted up the ladder 3 rungs at a time. Turns out a new mate was inspecting the release station and unwittingly set off the alarm by opening the cabinet containing the release valves. That's a sound I never want to be surprised by again. Found a large-ish leak on our main saltwater cooling line while we were around the Aleutian Islands. Granted, the hole was only about the size of a dime, but seeing a jet of water spraying into the bilge, which was rapidly filling, rapidly increased the pucker factor on that trip. Further complicating matters, the boat was old enough that everything, generators, main engines, AC equipment, was cooled with salt water. In order for us to stop the leak, we had to go fully dark, shutting down main electrical power, going onto the emergency generator, for almost 4 hours while we scratched our heads and slapped together a patch. After we made it back into Kodiak, the boat went into dry dock, where it stayed for 6 months because they kept finding other major no-sale items. My fear wasn't for my safety but for the safety of the guy on the other boat. A few years back my dad and I had just tied up as a nor'easter was rolling in. We were on one of the docks along the Long Island Sound, the part of coast adjacent to Long Island, New York, which was notorious for bad storms. I don't remember exact details of how we got into this, but turns out some guy hadn't returned to the docks and the dockmaster, who was friends with my pops, asked him to go out looking in this horrible storm. My dad, being the thick-skulled gung-ho adventurous man that he was, agreed to go looking in this terrible storm. Our boat could handle it. We had gone through many storms before with no problem. Our boat had 2 outriggers that served as stabilizers, so capsizing wasn't a big concern. However, the boat we were looking for was a tiny center console that was maybe 25 feet long, and to mail it better the guy had no kind of GPS or locator on him. He didn't even have a radio. We were literally looking around in the dark for him for an hour. Luckily, as we were passing a little bay, he had the sense to grab one of his flares and fire it off after he saw our lights, and we were able to get within shouting range. Now, if that wasn't enough, this guy had really just thrown safety out the window. We shouted for him to put on a life vest. Turns out he had none on the vessel, nor did he have a life raft. To make it worse, his anchor chain wasn't a chain, but a single rotting dock line, so his anchor snapped. Coupled with the fact that the waves were slowly pushing him towards the rocky shores, he was lucky we found him. Our original plan was to attempt a tow, but the conditions were so bad we couldn't get close enough without risking a collision. We had to wait there for the Coast Guard to hone in on our beacon since they had no way of locating this guy's boat, and they were able to retrieve him. Thankfully, his monstrosity of a boat crashed against the rocks after he had been carted away. The scary thing is that he had his 8-year-old son on the boat with him the whole time. I'll answer seriously, and there were a few things that were scary. First of all, going round the Cape of Good Hope is quite scary with some of the roughest seas in the world. I worked on chemical tankers and there was a small hatch on top of the tank we would open to measure the levels by which it was being unloading, etc. Sometimes pressure can build in the tank and you can release it by opening up a valve. Well, someone didn't and a huge jet of clear liquid shot 40 feet into the air. Now I didn't know what it was and it could have been anything from acids to palm oil. A little bit of poo escaped when I saw that. Finally losing all power and drifting in the middle of the Pacific was eerie. A girl I know is a fisheries observer for the NOAA and goes on trips for weeks at a time with random fishing crews. One time she was 90 miles offshore, the only girl on the boat, and the whole crew stated shooting up heroin. One of the guys got really touchy and started saying really creepy things. There was literally nothing she could do if things went wrong because everyone else was either too fucked up or didn't care. She had to spend 3 more weeks on a boat with these people. My dad was sailing alone in Lake Erie. He was adjusting the rigging on his boat and fell into the water and his boat kept on going. He thought he was fucked because there wasn't a boat in sight. But later 2 guys on some jet skis passed by and picked him up. Later his boat was found bobbing up against the shore. No damage though. I was a lookout on a naval submarine during a storm in the Atlantic. The tower of a sub is tiny 4*x6 and slippery. Subs tip side to side a lot too since they are tubular. The waves were giant, probably 20 feet from top to bottom, but they were very long and had no crest. We would drive up one side, Then I couldn't see the bottom and would nearly crap my pants before we tipped down and drove the backside of the wave. It helped that the officer of the deck was crazy like Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump and was holding the rope to his harness like he'd just lassoed the submarine and was yelling yeehaw and yahaha every wave. It made me chuckle and think I was going to die. But I was thankful I'm not the type to get seasick. That's worse. I had to go take a shit at about 2 in the morning. I didn't tell the guy on watch I was going out on deck. Our toilet was a 5-gallon bucket on the starboard side of the vessel. So, I am doing my business when all of a sudden I see a fairly large wave coming at us broadside. All I could think was I am going to get swept off my bucket and sent across the deck with my pants down and turds scraping by me right before my fanny pack style CO2 primed flotation device explodes. Just as the wave is about to sweep over me, the boat rolls and meets the wave, sending spray vaulting vertically in the air. I was able to let out a quick sigh of relief before I see another wave rolling hard towards us. I am wiping furiously as the wave smashes into the side of vessel. Spray once again leaps high above the railing. It was as if Poseidon himself wanted to be day my butthole. I furiously pull up my shorts and as I turn to jettison my shit overboard I see a waving rolling in bigger than the last 2 waves combined. I turned around, tied down the shit bucket, and bolted back inside. Not really life-threatening, but the idea of getting swept across deck with your bird scraping along and turds marking you up was scary to me. I'm not a sailor but almost died, at least it felt like it, on a Carnival cruise. Captain was an idiot and got too close to a hurricane. Entire boat rocked back and forth to what felt like 45-degree angle, very steep to the point we were fighting to not slide down the floor. We had been in a theater on a lower level and after much debate decided to try to walk up the stairs to the deck. We didn't know what was the right thing to do. So much crying and screaming. People were donning life jackets and crew was taking down lifeboats, though none actually went off the side. All the pools spilled out into the ocean, and all the glass storefronts and most plates broke. Finally, after maybe 2 hours, the boat was stable and no longer had water covering all the windows. We were stuck on the boat an extra 4 days, part boat problems, part Miami port needed to be cleared out, and we were bored to tears because all the stores were closed, pools were empty, and we were given leftover food day after day on what plates remained. Everything smelled like liquor from smashed bottles. Not fun. I'll never forget that first half hour or so where I was sure I was going to go down like the Titanic, but had to pretend it was normal for the sake of the kids. The crew was half helpful, and half useless, saying oh this is normal, bullshit, and the captain was really useless and didn't even make an announcement until like 4 to 5 hours after the incident. No more cruises for me. I was a Navy sailor who went out to sea many times for weeks at a time. One of my jobs was being a lookout to spot boats, planes, things in the water or air pretty much and report it back to the ship. My lookout rotation could have me standing watch during the day or night, sometimes both, and it was during the nights where I was pretty afraid, especially if you were at the back of the ship alone. For anyone who hasn't been out in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night should realize you see many more lights in the sky than you would ever in a city. And on Navy ships they like to have very little lights on at night, so standing watch around 1 AM feels very alien sometimes. And during the nights without a bright moon to help with your vision, you may as well be on a different planet. There was this one time I saw bright green color moving in the water slowly and I didn't know what it was. My mind told me maybe it's oso or something else. Eventually I was told it was just plankton, but it sure looked freaky to someone who wasn't aware of the glowing plankton produces. Another time me and another guy were standing watch together and I decided just to look up during 2 AM and see what things I would come across the midnight sky. I would see meteors streak across the sky, but a couple of times there were bright lights moving slowly way out there. Perhaps a satellite, maybe, who knows. But I stared for a good 20 minutes in the sky and encountered approximately 15 of those slow-moving lights in different areas of the sky, perhaps many millions of miles apart. Either way, those were the few times I saw for myself how vast space really is and that there was so much unknowns out there that humans have yet to discover or explain. Not out at sea but on a pretty wide section of the Mississippi River. Was working on a paddle wheel heading north on a 7-day journey. I was sound asleep and it was around 4 AM that I woke to a sudden jolt that nearly knocked me from my bunk. A split second later the emergency alarms all went off, at which I shot up so fast that I forgot that I had an AC duct over my head, smacked it so hard I put a massive dent in it. No idea how I didn't knock myself out in the process. Jumped off of my bunk and grabbed my life jacket and was out of my room before I realized I was just in boxers. Ran back in and threw on my shorts and bolted for the deck. Once on deck I realized that it was a foggy and moonless night. People were freaking out thinking we were sinking and us, the crew, were doing what we could to keep everyone calm. not even know that was happening ourselves. Also, the fog was so bad and the night so dark that no matter how hard we tried there was no seeing the shore or our surroundings. The freakiest part of it all was knowing that whatever we hit was absolutely massive and no one could see a thing anywhere. The suspense at the time was driving people crazy. In the end, we were all required to stay on deck until the sunrise and thereafter learned that we stuck a barge that was partially sunk. Oh, and then realized we were on a stretch of the Mississippi that was nearly a half-mile wide. Anyone who would have jumped and tried to swim absolutely would not have made it. A huge, about half the length of my ship, so approximately 100 to 140 meters squid about 70 meters underwater. We were working on setting up buoys and clearing a few nets to relay a new batch. It was blood red in color, far from me but still close enough, about 300 meters away. The tentacles were thick as fuck. It kept floating nearby, eventually disappearing from our sight. The only time I've seen a creature like that. I am really thankful it didn't attack any of us. I sure as hell wouldn't have survived. This happened in late 90s in the Pacific Ocean. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily videos, and join the Spooky Squad.